My name is Pat Allen, and we are here today on January the 26th, 2018 rather, and we're at the Cincinnati State Community College branch in Middletown, Ohio, and we are taking an interview of Thomas Lee Richards for the Veterans History Project, and we're doing this on behalf of the Cincinnati Hamilton County Public Library. Thomas, thank you for your service, and it's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm grateful to you for agreeing to do this interview. What do people call you? Are they Tom or Thomas?
Tom.
Tom? Are you care if I refer to you as Tom today?
Okay.
All right.
Except my family, they call me Tommy.
Okay. All right, Tom, before we get into your Vietnam career, let's talk a little bit about who you are and about your family. When were you born?
I was born here in Middletown.
All right. When?
Beg pardon?
When?
1947, October 27th.
All right. And what were your parents' names?
My mother's name was Stella. My father's name was Foster.
All right. And what did your dad do for a living?
My dad was, he worked in manufacturing. He was a welder at General Motors.
All right. Was that in Cincinnati or Dayton?
Up in Dayton.
Up in Dayton. Which plant?
The old Frigidaire plant.
Okay. And how about your mother? Did she ever work outside the home?
She did a little bit. She did some cosmetic sales and she sold Raleigh home products for a while, but she worked out of the house.
All right. And you have any brothers and sisters?
I have two brothers, younger.
And their names are?
Wilbur and John.
And Wilbur's how old?
Wilbur is 66, he's probably 65, and my other brother, no. I'm 70, he's probably 69 or 68, and my other brother is 66.
John's the youngest?
Yeah.
All right. And have you always lived in Middletown?
I've lived in this area.
Okay.
When I was younger, I was born in Germantown, but my parents lived in Franklin. When I was younger, we moved to Carlisle. We moved around a lot. And then we moved from Carlisle to Germantown, where I had some of my best memories was in Germantown. We lived on a little farm there.
Okay.
And I lived there from the time I was about 8 until 12. And then we moved to Franklin. And then we moved from Franklin out to Pennaroll Hill, which is outside of Franklin, still in Franklin. And then we moved back to Carlisle while I was in high school. So we did move around a lot.
So your grade school was in Germantown?
Yes.
And then high school mostly in Franklin?
And Carlisle.
And where'd you graduate? Which school?
I never graduated.
Didn't graduate?
No.
How far did you go?
I went to the 11th grade.
Did you complete the 11th?
No.
All right. Did you start the 11th?
Yes.
And so when you dropped out of school, did you get a job, or what did you do?
I got a job before I dropped out of school.
Okay, good.
I went to work at a machine shop. Well, I worked at a restaurant while I was in school, and then I got a job at a machine shop in Germantown.
What was the name of that shop?
Dups.
Okay.
They made meat packing equipment. I worked there as a machine operator.
They're still in business, I understand.
Beg pardon?
They're still in business, I
Yes,
understand.
yes, they are. And then
What did you do for Dups?
I ran machines. I ran a drill, a lathe, a mill, and I was pretty much a laborer there.
All right.
They put me on those machines when they didn't have nothing else for me to do.
So how long did you work for Dups?
About 5 months, I believe.
Then what?
And then they had applications. They were asking for people to come to General Electric and apply. I went down there and applied for a job, and I hired on down there.
Good. What did you do for GE?
I ran a lathe. I ran what they call a T-lathe. It's never saw one before, but it's a lathe. It's a different shape.
All right. And how long did you work at GE?
36 and a half years.
36 and a half years. Now, you had a little bit of interruption there, didn't you?
Yes. I worked there for about 5 months, 6 months. Let's see, I hired in June. Wait a minute. I hired in February, March, April, May, June, July, June. I worked there about 5 months.
All right.
And then I went to GE and I worked there the rest of my working career.
Okay.
Although, while I was at GE, I had other part-time jobs. I worked 2 jobs a lot of times.
All right. Are you married now?
Yes.
What's your wife's name?
My wife's name was Lois.
And when did you and Lois get married?
We got married in '79.
And how did you meet Lois?
My brother was in the hospital, and I went to visit him, and she was an aide that worked there. And I talked with her there briefly, and then the same night, I left work. After I went to work at GE, I worked second shift. I got off work, and I stopped at a bar and ran into her there, and we've been together ever since. I mean, not together from then on, but we got together.
Right, right.
We started dating and got married shortly after we met. And it's been a successful marriage, I must say.
That's wonderful.
We get along good. We've never had any real serious problems.
And how about brother? Well, you told me about your brothers. When you were in Carlisle or Franklin, did you participate in any sports?
I played football in Carlisle.
All right.
Played high school football.
Okay. And when did you join the service? Were you drafted or did you enlist?
When I turned 19, I had just been married a short time. About 5 months, I turned 19 years old on October 27th of 1966. And November the 23rd, Uncle Sam called me in. I got drafted then.
Where did you report?
I went to Fort Knox for basic training. And from there,
How long was basic?
it was about 8 weeks, I believe.
All right.
My memory's not that good back then. I went in November, so they gave us a Christmas break. So we had a little bit of time off in between our starting and our graduation.
Okay.
And I'm thinking we graduated in late February or early March. And then from there, I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana, for advanced infantry training.
All right.
And we were trained at a place called Tigerland.
Oh, after the LSU Tigers?
I don't know. It was designed from Vietnam. They were very accurately built villages that were
Supposed to replicate the
It
villages?
replicated the Vietnam villages, and it was very, very realistic. I mean, they even had the little wild pigs running around, little pot-bellied pigs, and it was a good training exercise, but it's always an exercise. You don't worry, you don't pay a lot of attention until you really need those experiences,
Right.
and it's a all different story.
Well, how long were you there at Fort Polk?
About 8 weeks.
And then where did you go?
Well, I came home for a week. Then I had to report down to Fort Knox. And at Fort Knox, I went to driver's training for the Armored Personnel Carrier. They picked our names out at Louisiana and Fort Polk, and they sent us back there to learn to drive Armored Personnel Carriers. So, you know, that was a pretty good job. It was fun.
How long was that job?
That was only 2 or 3 weeks. About 3 weeks, I guess. They don't need much. You don't need a whole lot of education to drive one of those things.
Okay. So then what happened to you?
I went home for another week, and then I took off for California. I went
How
out
did
to
you get
Fort Ord, California.
How'd you get to California?
I had to
Airplane or
fly,
train?
yeah.
Okay.
They paid all my transportation while I was in.
All right.
So I went to California. I was out there for, I'm thinking maybe 10 days. And then I boarded the jet for Vietnam. I'll never forget the guy that called our names out. He told us, he said, "We're going to fly you to Vietnam on the finest aircraft the United States has to offer, the Boeing 727 Golden Tail." I thought, wow, this is great, you know. And then when you get to Vietnam, you'll be flown in one of the finest aircraft the Army has to offer, the C-130. I didn't know what the difference was. But when I saw the C-130, I thought, this thing will never get off the ground. It was like an elephant.
Well, how long were you in California before they sent you on over to Vietnam?
California was just a bored waiting period.
Okay.
You couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything. You had to stay right there at the barracks all the time.
Are we talking days or weeks or hours?
I was there, I think, about 10 days.
Okay.
That's when the best I can remember. I know I run up an awful telephone bill. I really did. I shouldn't have, but you know, you didn't have nothing else to do. If you could talk to somebody back home, that's what you wanted to do.
Well, when you were out there in California, did you know where you were going in Vietnam?
Oh, no. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew that I was going.
Yeah. All right. So you're on the plane and you go to Vietnam. Where do you land?
Landed at a place called Cameron Bay. And that's a replacement detachment there. Very hot. The experience there is something that sticks in my brain that I'll never be able to erase.
Well, tell us about it.
We were on the airplane. We landed. I mean, it's not a big thing, but it's just so distinctive in my mind. The airline hostess, it's a commercial flight, and the airline hostess, we had several young girls there, and they went through the airplane and they were spraying this aerosol, and it was real sweet, like a room deodorizer. And the lady said, it's actually an insect repellent, and we do that to keep the airplane clean of getting bugs from Vietnam in there. Well, you know, you smell this real sweet smell, and then when you get off the airplane, it's like sticking your head in your mom's oven.
Oh, gee.
I thought my eyes were going to dry up from the heat that hit me in the face. I mean, I'll never forget it. It was just like putting your face down in an oven. And the smell, it smelled like spoiled meat. The whole place smelled like spoiled meat. For the first 5 days, I don't think I could eat anything. I drank a lot of tea. I went to they let us go to a club at night, and I'd go in there and I'd snack on potato chips and popcorn and stuff like that, but I couldn't keep anything on my stomach from the mess hall. It just smelled too bad there. But I eventually got used to it. I got hungry enough, I guess. But there at Cameron Bay for 10 days, we filled sandbags. Every day you had to fill so many sandbags. And it was so hot. It just, I think those 10 days there was to acclimate you. They don't say that, they don't tell you that, but you're there working in the hot sun for 10 days before you go to your unit.
All right.
So that's what it was for me.
So what did they do with the sandbags? Were these being prepared to be sent
Oh, they
out,
would
sent out to
put
the
them around
different...
the barracks bottoms
Okay.
to protect from mortars and stuff like that. And they had buildings all over, and we were bagging all the buildings,
Okay.
whatever they had. The buildings were, I guess you'd call them a tropical building. They were like a long barracks. They were 2 stories high. They had an upper floor, but the bottom had wood paneling or wood siding up so far, and then it was screened up so far.
All right.
And just to let the air through, I guess, because it was so hot there. They had metal roofs. It was hot. You could go to the showers. They had showers out back. They spent a lot of time in the showers because that's the only cool place around. And they had skids laid on the sand for you to walk on because you couldn't walk on it barefooted. You could
Okay.
barely walk on it with your boots on. But when you come back from the showers, I remember looking back behind me as I was walking. When you got out of the shower, you just wrap a towel around you and walk back to the barracks. and then lay back there with a towel over you soaking up the sweat. That's what we did. When you look back at the skid where you'd walked, you could see your footprints evaporating right before your eyes.
Oh, wow.
It was that hot. Stayed at Cameron Bay for 10 days, and then they took me I thought I was going to the 1st Infantry Division when I got there, but I was wrong. They put me with the 1st Cav Division. Well, I found out later that I had been assigned there already, but I didn't know it. But I was a replacement for the 1st Cav Division. All the guys that I knew, there was maybe 20 guys that left Fort Knox with me that went to Armored Personnel's driver school. We were all on the same plane. And we all got split up. One guy and me went to my company. Another guy went to one guy that I knew went to a sister company, and the rest of the guys, I don't know where they went. They were just scattered different companies all over. So I went to a place. I went to B Company of the 2nd Battalion of the 12th Cavalry, the 1st Cav Division.
And that was where? Where'd they send you
It was
out?
on K.
All right.
And from on K, I stayed there for maybe a week. They took us out on a patrol there at the base just to show us what we were doing. And they gave us a demonstration of napalm and ARAs, the rockets, the helicopters coming in shooting rockets for us that we could call in, stuff like that. They just familiarized us with the operations that we were going to be doing when we got out there.
All right.
So after that, I think they put me on an airplane. Nope. They picked me up on a helicopter and took me out in the field, out in the jungle somewhere. They dropped me off on this mountaintop. They had cut an LZ for us to land.
So how many guys were on the copter with you?
Just me.
Just you?
Well, there was the door gunners that normally go.
Okay.
Then they had supplies and stuff on the chopper too.
But
I was just part of the supplies. They took me out there and dropped me off with this company. So
where's
guy,
your other buddy that had been with you?
Well, one of them was there, but they took him one way and they took me another way. So
right.
he was in one platoon, I was in another. And
so they drop you off in the LZ.
right, and I went and met my squad, which I can't remember half their names. The squad that I was in, and later that day, we made an air assault. I hadn't been in the field a whole day yet, and we're making an air assault. And they told me that my squad leader, the platoon leader, told me, he said, just stay with these guys. I didn't know none of them. Stay with these guys and go with them. Wherever they go, you go with them. So that's what I was doing. I was just trying not to lose these guys and try to remember who I was with.
Now, how old are you at this time? Like
Just 19.
19.
Yeah. And we had our first air assault, and that was an experience. I'd never been on an air assault before. I'd ridden in the helicopters, but I'd never had an air assault.
Now, was this a different kind of a helicopter that?
It was a Huey, just a regular slick, what they called them. And what really got me was when our first one was, it was what they call a one-ship LZ. Only one helicopter could land at a time. And we were right on the top of a ridge. And when the helicopter would come in, I remember there was, they had cut down a bunch of trees on both sides of where the helicopter was. There's big high stumps around the trees laying there. You had to kind of walk and maneuver around them to get out to the LZ where the helicopter was. Well, when they picked us up, they took us up, picked us up in the helicopter, and I'll never forget when we lifted off, the helicopter nosed down and just like it dove down the side of this mountain. It scared the heck out of me. But it would just get gaining airspeed and then it pulled up. But it was just, it was exciting, but it was scary. And
Now when they dropped you off at this LZ by yourself, did they land or did you have to jump to the ground?
oh yeah, they landed. They let me climb off. It wasn't a jump.
Okay.
But they had, like I said, other stuff to unload too,
Right.
water and sea rations and things of that nature.
Well, how long were you there at that location?
Oh, I was only there about maybe 2 or 3 hours, and then we took off on a air assault. And when I say air assault, and that's what we called them, air assaults, it was when they pick you up and fly you to another location and put you down in a location. Well, most of these places they take you to are supposed to be enemy active. So we called them an air assault. Now, lots of times when you got on the ground, you didn't see nothing, you didn't hear nothing, but you had to go through the same procedure each time.
Just in case.
Oh yeah, when you hit the ground, when your helicopter hits the ground, you're supposed to unload and go to a certain clock number. Okay, if the helicopter's 12 o'clock, it's pointed at 12 o'clock. If you're supposed to go to 1 o'clock, you run off to 1 o'clock, and that's where you set up. You run off all the LZ and you set up there, and somebody else is going to come right along behind you. They'll fill in the whole clock when the helicopters come in. So you make a perimeter as you land. And we did this every air assault that we made. So, you know, we made
on this first one, what was there any
we
enemy
landed
there?
We landed in a dry rice paddy, no activity at all. And a lot of my time was with no activity at all. It was pretty hot and boring and kind of miserable most of the time. But this time it wasn't that bad. Only thing I can remember is we had some engineers with us that they built a little bridge. We crossed this creek and went up, set up a perimeter on top of this hill, and the engineers built a little bridge across the creek. And I went down to get something to eat. They brought helicopters with flyer food out to us, and they put them in the big green insulated containers, and you go through and dip out your food, or somebody would dip it out for you. Got something to eat, and I was coming back across that little bridge, and I felt something in my belly button, and I had a leech stuck on me in my belly button. Well, it scared me, and I pulled it off and threw it in the water, and then I bled, and I bled, and I bled. I couldn't believe it. You know, they gave you little toilet paper wads in the sea ration. I took that toilet paper and I stuck it down in my belt, you know, between that and my belly button. I just bled it full. Then I bled another one full. It just kept bleeding. But it finally quit. And then I realized, you know, they don't hurt. It's not a very pleasant idea, but leeches don't hurt.
Well, how are you supposed to get them off if you don't pull them off?
Well, they give you insect repellent. You acquire it wherever you can get it. It comes out on a helicopter. Sometimes if you get a bottle of it, you're lucky, you know. You squirt insect repellent on it, it'll take them off, or you stick a cigarette to it, it'll take it off, or you sprinkle a little salt on it.
All right.
And that'll take them off of you. You put salt on a leech, it melts it.
Oh, okay.
We melted a lot of leeches. Didn't like them.
So this first air assault doesn't result in any activity.
Only activity I had was a leech.
Just a leech, okay. And then,
That
then
was-
they take you back to your LZ or what?
No, we stayed out for, I don't know how long we stayed out.
Are we talking days or weeks?
Days.
All right, then where?
And then they pick us up, take us somewhere else, drop us off. We do the same thing. What we would do is they drop us in an area where they thought there was activity, and we would find a high ground, set up a perimeter, and then we would run patrols out of that perimeter in what we call cloverleaf around our area. And we'd look for enemy presence, any activity that we could find, any enemy we could find.
All right.
And that's what you do over there.
So then keep on going. Tell me, keep on with your progression.
Well, it was, I guess I was there probably, I got there on 28th of May. I had been on several patrols. I had walked point. And then they loaded us up and they took us to a place called Docteau. And Docteau was a real mountainous area in the Central Highlands, pretty remote.
And this is in South Korea as opposed to North.
Vietnam.
Yeah.
And we traveled, it seemed like it took us all day to get there. And we got there, it was dark. And I remember we climbed this hill to where we were going to spend the night, and our first sergeant had gone ahead of us, and he had the cook to fix us something to eat. We hadn't eaten all day. We had been moving all day. And I remember he fixed us some cold turkey sandwiches. But the turkey was about that thick and the bread was about that thick, and it was probably the best sandwich I ever had because I was hungry. We stayed there overnight, and the next day they took us out on a Chinook. That's the big helicopters, and dropped us off on a hilltop out in the boonies there somewhere.
Now, how many guys are in that crew with you?
There was around 300. It was our whole battalion. Actually, it was probably a little more than that.
Well, how many in the Chinook?
In the Chinook, there was probably 20,
Okay.
25 men maybe.
Okay.
So you get out of the Chinook, you make your clock, you know, and everything. Well, I was the walk point that day. My platoon was the lead platoon, and my squad was the lead squad, and I was walking point for my squad. Now, every day that rotates. The next day, I wouldn't have to walk point. One of the other squads would send somebody to the point, and one of their people would walk point. I was walking point that first day. We went down a hill, pretty steep mountain, crossed a little creek at the bottom, and when I crossed the creek, I found this real well-used trail. So I called back. I had them call back and tell them, and I remember a guy was behind me. He's not with us today. He told me, he said, it's probably a mountain yard village around here, which made sense, you know. That's what we were at, out in those mountain yard area. And so I was told to follow the trail, which normally you don't do that. You parallel, but I followed the trail like I was told to do. I went a certain distance, maybe a couple hundred yards, and then I saw these steps cut into the side of the mountain. They were big, wide steps. They were only so deep, but they were real wide. And they had like a split log along the front of them to keep the dirt in place. And they had those stacked up the hill there, and they had steps made. And they were, you know, long steps.
What are you thinking those are for?
Elephants.
Okay.
That's what I think they were for. I didn't find no elephant scat, but they would have hidden it if they'd been there. I went up the hill there, and when I got up there, it was dark in there. This place had triple canopy, and it was dark in there. And I saw sun rays coming down through the trees. And I realized that when we were up there on the LZ where they landed us, you could hear them shooting artillery over there, boom, 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 shooting the top of this hill. Well, they were prepping that for us. I didn't realize it. Anyway, I get over there and I see these beams of light coming down through the canopy, and where the artillery had blasted holes in that in the canopy, and you could see the light coming through. Well, the ground was covered in these black chips, like wood chips. And as I got toward the top of the hill, I looked off to the left, and there was a little table like built. It had legs in the front, but the back two legs were trees. And it was a woven top, like a basket would be, but it was flat. And then on top of it was a basket that had .45 caliber ammunition in it, brand new shiny stuff, a bowl full of it. So I called back and said, look, we got something up here. I didn't know what it was. So they told us to pull back, set up perimeter, and we started setting up perimeter around this place. It was a way station. It was on the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Okay.
And they had my squad, our platoon, after they had it secured there, to go over on the other side of this place and go down the mountain on the other side. They had steps cut down there too. And when you got down there, halfway down the hill, off to the right was a kitchen. And it was like a earthen outhouse. It had a step cut in it, had holes, 3 holes in it, and then it had little holes down underneath it where they fed the wood into it, and they had little fires in there, and they cooked on it. Then the top of it had a canopy that came down over it that was kind of with the contour of the mountain, and you had to squat down to get in it, but they had pipes, bamboo pipes and ditches running up the side of the mountain that had been covered, and the smoke would filter out through those ditches up through there, and you couldn't see it.
All right.
We went on down, and there was a little bridge, and then we crossed the bridge, and the trail went around the side of a mountain. Well, on the side of this mountain, they had tripods all over the place with little spider holes, and that's where they slept at night and kept their rifles up off the ground. So we only went so far. We saw this stuff. It was just one platoon. We didn't know it was a pretty good size operation going on. So we went back, and I discovered a bunch of weapons, a weapons cache, and then
On the way back?
Well, I found it on the way out,
Okay.
but they had it secured before we went out and looked. But I had found a cache of weapons. I found an M16 rifle, which is one of our rifles,
Right.
with a scope on it. I never saw
Sniper
one
ones?
before.
Somebody's using it as a sniper?
Apparently, it was stolen from another outfit
Oh,
that was taken off of the dead. 173rd Airborne had a real bad fight up there a week before we got there. That was the reason they took us up there. They took us up there to try and find the enemy that
had
wiped
caused.
out the 173rd. They took almost a whole company out.
Oh, really?
Yes. And
Well, when did you find that out?
found that out later
Oh.
after we'd been there. Went back and found these stores of rice. They were a feed sack, like a
Yeah.
burlap bag. But it would take 6 GIs to carry it. You put one on each corner, put a strap underneath the middle of it, and 2 guys in the middle. I'd say they were probably 4 feet wide, the bags were, and probably 7 or 8 feet long. That's the reason I think they were using elephants,
Okay.
because you couldn't carry that.
Okay.
A bicycle would be kind of hard to navigate up those steps, but I
Sure.
guess they could do it. But I suspect they had an elephant in there. We heard that they did. So, I don't know. We never did find the elephant. So the next day, we spent the night there. They cataloged all the weapons that we found, and the rice. They took the rice and they carried it out. They took it to a refugee center for the people living there.
All right.
And
What'd they do with the
the
rifles?
rifles, well, I tagged 2 of them, but that's the last I know of them. I never saw them again. I was supposed to get those rifles, but I never did.
Were they Russian
They
arms?
were probably Russian. They were SKS rifles. Both of them had bayonets on them. They had the triangular shaped bayonets, which was outlawed by NATO, but they had them.
Okay.
They logged all that stuff, took it out of there that night. Next day, we spent the night there. Oh, it got cold. I mean, we hadn't been in any cold place in Vietnam, but it was cold up in those mountains. And the next day, they brought in chow for us. And we got up and, no, they didn't give us chow. They were going to fly it in, but the fog was too heavy and they wouldn't bring it in. Well, they wanted to get us moving. So my platoon was still in the lead, but I had rotated to the rear of the column, thank goodness. And when we went out that next morning, and those guys got down to where the bridge was, they walked into an ambush. Okay. I was in it too, but I was higher up the hill. I wasn't as directly into it. Well, this happened on the 29th of June. Now I got there 28th of May.
Yeah.
This was the 29th of June. I've been in the country just a month when I got into my first firefight, and my rifle jammed. All I could do, back when I got there, they gave me an M79 to carry, and I carried it for a few days, but they gave me the ammo was in a Claymore bag, and you just hang it around your neck, and when you're humping and going up and down hills and trying to get through bushes and stuff, those things would swing around, they wear you out. So I traded my M79 for an M16. Well, the M16 I never realized it, but a lot of them had them, had You know what blousing garters are?
No.
They're garters that you put around your pants, and
Okay.
the Army uses them. Put them around your pants at the bottom to blouse them. They had blousing garters around the rifle, had a cleaning rod in it. The elastic bands were holding a cleaning rod on. Well, I never thought about why it was there. I just thought it was handy, you know. Well, I wound out why it was there. You shoot one time and you had to ramrod it out of there, knock the shell out. Then you dump the thing, put another round in, boom, and you got to start all over again.
Really?
Yes. So I was useless. My first firefight, I was useless. So I got behind a tree and stayed there. It didn't last very long. All I know is it was just like an explosion went on up front, and then all this rifle fire going on. And I heard a couple explosions. And then all this rifle fire was going on. Well, after a few minutes, it kind of slowed down, and I heard somebody yell, "Cease fire." And my platoon leader, his name was Lieutenant McFarland, he come down the hill from behind me, and somebody kept shooting down there, and he said, "Cease fire." And they kept shooting. He yelled, "Cease fire." And when he did that, somebody shot him. He shot him in the shoulder. It was a sniper that was laying down there shooting at us, and he thought it was one of our people shooting.
Ouch.
So he got shot. They took him back up the hill. I took his rifle, and he took mine.
So now you're armed.
At least I was armed then, yes. And it was one of the little short ones, the AR-15. All the officers carried those. And
Well, how'd the rest of your platoon do? Did have any casualties?
the first squad that was in the point, we lost 8 people. And my platoon sergeant, he come over and he told me, he says, "Go down front and help bring those guys back up out of here." So, you know, I'm just cranked anyway.
Yeah.
So we go down there, and I see these bodies laying all around. And the Vietnamese bodies, I remember thinking they're young. They got fresh haircuts. They're clean. They're well fed, but they're green. Their skin was green.
Green.
Yes.
For camouflage?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just the coloration. They were dead.
Okay.
And the color drained out. It might have been a reflection from the green, but their skin looked green to me.
Okay.
There was a guy there that I helped carry out. I looked at his dog tags. He was Polish.
Okay.
I couldn't pronounce his name. I've looked it up on the computer since. And I attribute him for my success in living, because I heard that the reason he died was because his rifle jammed. Okay, and he was shot in the face. I didn't see his face.
Yeah.
He was laying face down in a poncho when I got there. But you could see lumps of hair and stuff coming out of the back of his head. It was really irregularly shaped. I mean, they shot his face up. And they said he was screaming, "No, no," when they shot him. His rifle wouldn't shoot.
Was that a frequent occurrence?
At that time, it was very frequent. We had a lot of trouble with the M16 rifles, and it's not a mystery. It happened all over. The Marines wouldn't even carry them. They weren't a very dependable rifle, and they came up with excuses. You know, they operated too fast for the magazines to feed, or the ammunition they used had the wrong kind of powder in it, which caused the chambers to carbon up real bad, and the rounds would stick in there. That's what happened to mine. The round would go in and it'd fire, but you couldn't pull the rim off of it.
Okay.
The extractor pin would just peel the rim off of it. So I'd have a shell there stuck sideways. I'd have to jam it out of there. But anyway, what happened was it would jam. It'd pull one out, it wouldn't come out, it would stay there, and then it would shove another one in, and you have 2 rounds stuck in there.
Yeah, you blow yourself up.
Well, you pull the one out that's not in the chamber yet, and then you get the one out of the chamber, and then you throw another one in there and start all over again. It's a mess.
Jeez.
And I can understand how a lot of guys died from the M16 rifle not firing right. I mean, it's well known.
Okay, so you get these guys back up the hill.
We took them up the hill. They took them out. And while we're up there on the hill, they had a platoon come down on our left flank to cross over in front of us to follow these guys up this hollow where the ambush broke and ran to the right up this hollow. So they sent a platoon down to our left, and they crossed in front of us. When they crossed in front of us, there was a sniper still there, the one shot Lieutenant McFarland. He was still there. Nobody knew where he was. And then they walked over in front of us, and he started shooting down at them, and they started shooting back at us. I mean, they were shooting at him,
Yeah.
but he was shooting over him right at us. I mean, the bullets were flying over my head and right by me. And we heard them for a couple of hours. They went up that hollow. They got into another firefight up there, and we heard them banging away for a couple of hours. You could hear the enemy machine gun banging away. I mean, it just echoed down through the hollow, and you could hear it. Well, they pulled us back up and sent us over to where they were, where the ambush was that they walked into. And it was like a hollow went up, and then it split. And these guys had set a machine gun up right in the middle of
Right
that.
in the V.
Right. And then they had guys on both sides of it, and when these guys come up that hollow after them, they were sitting ducks. That lieutenant I carried out the next day, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. We went over, we took us probably a couple hours to get there. You could hear it. It didn't sound like it was that far away, but because we was being cautious, it took us a couple hours to get there. And when we got there, it was getting dark.
You kind of got an echo coming down the
yeah.
hollow, yeah.
It was getting dark by the time we got there. Now, it started in the morning, and we're still going through this. It's getting dark. We get down there, and there's this little plateau on the side of the hill, and we set up there, and the enemy had broke and left. So we had to go down and get the bodies and the wounded and bring them up out of there to where we were. And by the time we got the wounded out, they had to drop the basket down through the trees. And we'd load them in the basket, and they'd pull them back up there. I remember that light shining down there. It was scary because it was like a spotlight on you, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
We got the living out, the wounded, and the dead. It was probably 6 or 7 of them. We wrapped them up in ponchos and laid them there in a row, and we stayed there overnight and guarded them till the next day. And I remember I remember getting my mosquito net out, put it over top of my helmet, because the mosquitoes would just eat you up. And it rained that night.
What's happening to this sniper? Did anybody ever get that sniper?
Yeah, they got him.
Good.
One of the guys from behind me, they come down on the right-hand side, and they had an M79 with a shotgun around in it, and they blew him in half. That's what they said. I didn't see, but they said they blew him in half. Anyway, we stayed all night there. It rained, and it seemed like when it rained, it seemed like the bodies got heavier. I don't know. The next morning, we cut poles, and we tied these men on poles, and we carried them out of there. Like I said, it rained the night before, and it was so slick and muddy, and the leaves were slick. I remember one of the awfulest feelings I had was I had the head end of this lieutenant, and he'd been shot between the eyes, and he didn't even bleed.
Jeez.
And I was carrying this bamboo pole with his head about right here from me. And I was going up this hill, and I was backwards carrying him, and my foot slipped, and I dropped him and banged his head on the roots. I'll never forget how bad that made me feel, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Like I disrespected him.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something I did intentionally, but
sure.
it did make me feel bad.
Sure, it would.
So it took us all day to get back to where we had been the night before. And it was primarily because it was so wet, slick, and it was hard to get up out of there.
Uh-huh.
But we got them out, and that was my baptism, I call it.
Jeez. This a month into it.
Right. And then we left there, and we went to a place called Khartoum. And Khartoum was just as bad as Docto, but the mountains wasn't as heavily covered. There was a lot of mountains with elephant grass growing on them.
Okay.
And we made an air assault onto this one ridge, and it was covered in elephant grass. And ARA, those are aerial rocket artillery, they had come in to prep the LZ for us before we went in there, and they set this grass on fire. Well, when we went in, the elephant grass, you couldn't tell how steep the hill was because the grass was so tall. So the helicopters would come in to drop us off on this hill. Well, when the blades started chopping the grass, they wouldn't go any deeper. And I remember jumping out, I was probably 10 or 12 feet off the ground.
Wow.
And I had a radio on me, and I remember turning uphill, so when I landed, I'd be landing on my face. But when I hit the ground, it pulled me backwards, and I went backwards down the hill. I slid for a little bit, not very far. The grass was too tall, and I spun myself around and got up, started up the hill. And because this operation was supposed to be like 10 days, we were all supposed to carry extra water. I had a 2-quart water blivet. It's like the guys drank the wine from,
Okay.
But this was plastic. It was the same thing, but it was made out of plastic. I had one of those on my pack. They took that from me and used it to put out the fire, to help put out the fire. So then the next day, after we spent that night, and everybody was out of water. When you run out of water, you find out who the real thieves are. Man, those guys, I mean, they come out of the woods now. When you got water, you got to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
People steal water from you now. Your best friend will steal water from you. But the next day, we got a helicopter in, got some water. We started down this hill, and it was a big, long ridge, elephant grass on both sides. And I was up on the hill, and I could see down the guys in front of me walking down this hill, and they were dropping like flies. And the first sergeant going around kicking them in the butt, telling them to get up, you got to go.
Were they slipping?
It was heat stroke. They were just passing out. Their lips were purple.
Oh.
We had to stop, water them down. We had to take some of them out of there, and this was just starting the day. So that was another place there in Khartoum. I didn't like that. That night we set up, and I think it was around this time that we had a tiger come up to our perimeter one night. I was on radio watch, and a friend of mine, I knew him. They called him Little John. He was with another platoon. He was out on an OP outpost.
Yeah.
He was out from us a ways, and every night, I might have been on OP that night too. To think about it, yeah, that night, every half hour, on the hour and a half hour, they call you on the radio and ask you for a sit rep or a situation report. And I'm laying there listening to the radio, and they call 16, 26, 36, and 46. That would be your 4 OPs. So they call 16. 16 says everything is negative. You don't say nothing, you just break squelch twice. If everything's good, you just hit the button twice. Got to the next guy, and he only hit the button one time. So the operator up at the CP asked him, he says, do you have a negative sit rep? No. He said, what's going on? And he gets on the radio and he says, we have movement to our front. And the guy on the radio says, wait one. So he gets the company commander up. The company commander comes out there and he's talking to Little John. He said, okay, Little John, now you've been here a while, don't get excited. You got movement out there. You don't want to give away your position.
By firing then.
But wake your buddies up and tell them all to lock and load and stay prepared. He said, sir, I did that 5 minutes ago. So they threw grenades at it. It was a tiger.
Oh.
They didn't know what it was. It was one of those nights where the moon was real bright, but it was cloudy, and the clouds would go over and they get pitch black dark, and then it'll get real bright again. Well, after they threw the grenades at it, they realized that it was a tiger. They saw it moving. And then the next day, we spent all day looking for that tiger. Never did find it. That's the way it went. But anything to break the boredom.
Yeah.
And then what was up there, we had an orangutan follow us around.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I never did see him. I'd get a glimpse of something moving in the trees, but never did get an eye on him. But everybody that was in the back said there was an orangutan following us through the woods, through the jungle. And that was a pretty unique experience there. And then we went back to Bong Song. That's where we started out at. That's where I started out at when I first went out, was in Bong Song. That was before we went to Dak To and then Kontum. When we got in Kontum, we were supposed to leave there, but they had monsoon rains coming in, and every morning when they were coming to pick us up, the rains would come in and have to turn around and go back. So we wound up staying there, probably 5 or 6 days because we couldn't get out. And we were flying with the 173rd helicopters. Well, they sent some first Cav helicopters up to get us, and they came and got us. They took us out of there, took us back down to Bong Song, where we did routine patrols down there. Never had much activity other than being sniped at from long distance off. They would shoot at you from 500 yards away, and like one round. When you was crossing the rice paddy dike or something, they'd shoot one round at you just to slow you down. So it'd take us all day long to cross the rice paddy.
Yeah.
And just stuff like that. We didn't have too much action going on there. We spent, I don't know how many months in that Bong Song area. There were some beautiful little places in there, you know, little paradise villages like.
Little villages like
Yeah,
you
they
had.
looked like undisturbed, had little gardens, grew pineapples and lemons and limes and bananas.
Well, did you avail yourself of some of the citrus and the bananas?
Well, I tried the bananas. I didn't try the citrus. They were little like that. They had limes like this. They had oranges like that.
Okay. How were the bananas?
The bananas, I never got a good banana. The bananas over there got seeds in them. I mean, they got seeds in them here, you know, when you buy them. They're little black dots in there.
Right.
Over there, they're like apple seeds. The seeds are like apple seeds.
Okay.
And the bananas don't get ripe and sweet like they do over here. They're kind of a...
Well, were some of these villages like the fake village that they had set up down in Louisiana?
Yeah, some of them were. Yep. But the one they had in Louisiana was more Viet Cong type. These up here, you couldn't tell that Viet Cong had been around there much, but they had been. They had had lots of battles before I got there in this same area. So they had probably run a bunch of VC out, but they just stayed hidden. They didn't run them out, they just stayed hidden.
How did the people treat you when you'd go through those villages?
Well, when I was first there, I didn't know. I didn't know. All the women, you know, very passive, scared-like.
Were there any men in the villages, or were they in the army, or were they old?
The only men were very old men or very young, you know, little boys. There was no young men per se there. We would find a woman carrying a little baby on her breast and say, "Where's the father?" She said, "He died." When did he die? 3 years ago. Well, who's the father? He died. You couldn't get a straight answer on that. They lied to you. You knew that baby wasn't 3 years old.
Right.
That was just some of the things that went along with learning what is going on over there.
Did you learn any basic Vietnamese?
Oh no, not really. Other than like Piglet and stuff like that. Didi Mao and La Dai. La Dai means come. Didi Mao means leave. And then they have the number 1, number 10. Number 1's good, number 10's bad. Those are what they would transfer to us.
Okay.
I don't know what their no and yes was, but they're number 1 or number 2 or number 10, you know.
Never
I
had
did
any
learn a little bit.
never had any
cussing.
problems going through any of those small villages.
Not really. I don't remember really ever finding anything other than found some crossbows. Those were in the remote villages. They were Monyard, and they were pretty neat. But other than enemy activity, you never saw any of it. You never saw any activity around there or any signs of it. They lived in the villages at night, and they'd leave in the daytime.
VC?
Yes. And we probably captured hundreds of VC and turned them loose. Because you couldn't prove what, you know, if they were or not. We captured one guy. You could tell he was mentally challenged, I would say. I'd put it like that. He was physically not developed very well. His teeth were really bad. But, you know, that's something where it could be caught. But you can tell by his eyes and the way he acted that he wasn't right. And his job was to go around at night, and he had a guitar. And his job was to go from villages to villages at night and sing Ho Chi Minh number 1. That's what our interpreter told me. He said he'd go at villages at night and he'd sing Ho Chi Minh number 1. So he was recruited for the Viet Cong.
Yeah.
We didn't do nothing with him. What can you do with him?
Yeah.
We took him in. They took him through intelligence, but who knows what happened to him after that. We stayed down there in Bong Song for quite a while, and then they moved us up north to replace some Marines in a place called Quai Son Valley. And we spent 3 or 4 months in Quai Son Valley. And we patrolled that valley pretty much the whole time. It was probably 2 miles long and 1 mile wide. Where we were, it actually got bigger as you went toward the coast. But back in the mountains, this is pretty much the size of the area we were patrolling. Plus, we had the mountains around that too. We made first contact out there when we moved into Quai Son. Our company made first contact there. We had a pretty nasty firefight. We lost about 8 men. I was a radio operator at the time. I was with the company commander, and it was, I remember we questioned these people in this little village. We found a cave that had gauze in it, big roll of gauze. And there was a woman and a little boy in this cave, and we'd question them and ask them, you know, is there any VC around here? She don't know what VC. Do you know NVA? We don't know what NVA is. They didn't know nothing. And 50 yards from that little cave, we walked into another ambush. And we got pinned down on the side of a hill, from about noon until it got dark. You couldn't move. If you moved, you got shot. We were there calling in artillery, air strikes, helicopter strikes, everything. And we were on a little ridge going up into this little valley, and then on the other side, the ridge coming down, there was these great big boulders. And, you know, to me, it's still a mystery to me how these boulders got up on the top of these ridges, up on these mountains. Huge boulders. And they look like they're granite. They had dug holes back underneath those rocks, and that's where they were firing from. Well, we threw everything we had at them,
And not touching
and they just kept shooting. They had jet airplanes. The bombers come in. They come in and make a pass, and then they turn and come up, and they come up while they're shooting at them. I mean, they were pretty well dug in.
Yeah, yeah.
And they had us pretty well bracketed too. We were stuck there on the side of the hill for a while. A lot of guys up front got killed. Guys behind me got killed, the mortar people. So that's where I probably got my first victim. A friend of mine says, "You see that guy over there moving?" I said, "No, I don't see him." He said, "That bush right there, watch." And the bush started moving. I shot him up.
So you've got your good gun by this time.
Oh yeah, I was still shooting the same one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a good rifle then, and we made the first contact there, and it was pretty bad. First sergeant got hit. Several of the guys got killed.
So do you have a medical?
friend that went with me, that went in the company with me, that went into another platoon, he got killed. He was a friend of mine.
Did you have any medics traveling with you, or did you always have to have a helicopter come in and get the wounded?
We had medics, and they kept the wounded alive, but they stayed in the field with us. When the helicopters came in, there was medics on the helicopters normally, or those crew chiefs. I think they had some medical training also, something to help, you know. They had the helicopters would come in, and we'd throw them on.
Yeah.
Throw them on, get them on there, and then they'd get out of there.
Yeah. Were you in any action where any of the helicopters got shot down?
Yes. Yeah. I was close to one that went down. It was in the Quezon Valley. We'd been there for quite a while at that time. We'd had several little skirmishes out there in the valley. Nothing as bad as the first one we got into. But we got into several little skirmishes out there where, you know, we fought our way out of those, and we killed a few gooks. But I probably shouldn't use that word. But
I've heard
that's
it
what the
used
word
before.
was. They were gooks. And later on, near the end of the year, now we got there in probably October. Around close to the end of the year in November, we started seeing a lot of activity going on in the valley. We started making more frequent contacts. Other companies were making contacts. And
What was there about this valley that caused there to be so much action there?
the Marines had fought there for probably a year before we got there, and they said they got it all cleaned out. They didn't. We went in, when we went in there, we took over a Marine support base, and they set up another base called LZ Ross. LZ Ross stayed there for the whole time. And then we set up another one out there where we made contact the first time with the NVA. They kicked our butts pretty bad there. We set up a fire support base out there. And the reason we did that was because in the valley, wherever you're at in the valley, our artillery was set up in the center of the valley toward the open end. And any time that you were in the valley and you needed artillery support, if you were between you and the enemy, you had to shoot the artillery over your head. Well, that's not a good thing. A lot of times those rounds fall short, and what they call it is a gun target line. You don't want to be on the gun target line. The guys would, the rounds would fall short in your perimeter or your unit. So they set up LZ Leslie, which was up on the hill there, on the west side of the valley, and when we were out here, then we could call for artillery to shoot across in front of us. That was the point of having that there. And then in December, November it started picking up, and in December we saw a big uptick in it. We had a battalion commander was flying like a patrol. He was out searching for the enemy in his helicopter. You got these helicopter antennas sticking off. We called it Charlie, the command chopper. And he had these fishing poles look like sticking off both sides. It was a big target for anybody looking for a helicopter. And he was out flying a ahead of us trying to spot the enemy and direct us to where we wanted to go. And he got too close to a big machine gun and they shot him down. He was out. I wasn't out there at the time. We were back at the LZ when that happened.
He didn't survive that?
He never survived it. None of the guys on the helicopter survived it. They were all killed, buried, or taken captured, taken prisoner. I think
buried. You see, the enemy's burying them.
they did bury two of the guys there. One of them was artillery liaison officer, and one of them was our battalion commander, which he shouldn't have been up there. But you know, he was gung ho. He was brave. He was too brave for his own good.
Yeah.
He got killed. A couple of days later, we went out to recover the bodies, and I remember we were laying there guarding the helicopter on the south side of this field, and the helicopter was right out in the middle. And there was a little wood line that came up the edge of that field, and it wasn't very big, just a little stand of bamboo, but it was a divider between the fields. And the helicopter was just above that. Helicopter was flying a circle over top of this. He was actually flying guard for the guys who was going out there to inspect the helicopter and try to find the bodies and recover the bodies. Well, they did. They found two of them. And then while they were out there, this helicopter was flying around, and apparently before we went out there, somebody had called for what they call a sky spot. And that's where airplane flies over up so high you don't even know he's there, drops a bomb on a certain grid coordinates. He has a target to hit, and they fly over up there and they drop one bomb, boom. Well, this helicopter was flying around. When that thing hit the ground, it was like a vacuum. It never hit the helicopter, but it's like it blew up and the helicopter was turned up sideways, and I remember it just falling out of the air. Pilot had his back hurt. The co-pilot was okay. One of the door gunners was kind of messed up a little bit, but it wasn't real bad like I thought. But when one of them goes down like that, you blow it up. You take all the rockets off of it, and you take the batteries out of it, you blow the helicopter up.
Okay.
So we blew up 2 helicopters that day. And after that, there was a unit, it wasn't ours, it was the 1st and the 7th Cavalry, or the 1st and the 9th, was doing patrols in that area, and they spotted a couple NVA on a ridge over top of, that was overlooking our LZ Ross. It was off in the distance, but they could see LZ Ross. And they found these guys up there on the ridge, and they had a map, and the helicopter pilots killed them. They went in and got the documents, and it was a plan for them to attack us at LZ Ross. So we had advanced planning that they were going to do it. We didn't know when, but we had an idea that it was going to be probably around Christmas. So at Christmas time, we're all on 100% alert. They had bulldozers come in before that. They bulldozed off all the land between us and the valley, where we had a good field of fire.
Open view.
They had bulldozers going to clear it all out. And we were waiting on them. And they came the 2nd of January. We thought they'd be there. I mean, we go on 100% alert. Everybody was still open Christmas, up awake all night Christmas, and then the next was New Year's, and we stayed up all night. Then the 2nd is when they hit us. And they had rockets, mortars, heavy machine guns. They threw everything they had at us. We had a unit of armored personnel carriers came in to stay with us. We knew they were coming. We just didn't know when. And the armored personnel carriers was on the west side of the perimeter, which is where we thought they were going to attack from, and that's where they came from. And those tracks, They had 50 caliber machine guns on them. They had M60 machine guns on them. And then we had positions all along there. So they never got close to us. They got to the wire, but they never got through. So we got them pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
We come out of that better than you'd think. For all the, I don't think we had anybody got killed, but we killed a bunch of them.
Well,
Killed a bunch
having their plan in advance was a real plus.
Oh yeah, and
Jeez.
you'd think they would have changed it.
Yeah.
But no, they attacked us. We got them.
So let me ask you this, a little off track, but you hear that the government kind of cheated on the body counts to make things look good back home. Did you guys, after any of these firefights or conflicts, ever count the number of
Yes. That
dead?
was part of the job. We went out the next day. Well, they attacked us that night. Daytime broke, they were gone. We went out looking for the bodies, and they were laying around all over.
Uh-huh.
And something I never realized was we had an interpreter with us. He was a scout, a Kit Carson scout. And he explained a lot of things to me that I would have never known. They have what they call coolies. Coolies are laborers that work for the NBA, and they would do the work for the NBA. They had coolies come in and dig out spots on the ground there for them to lay in and fight. We call them spider holes, fighting positions. They came in before the NBA did, and they dug all these holes. In the village, behind the bamboo in the villages, in little gardens and places like that, they had dug graves. And they dug the graves before the battle. So
they knew they were going to be.
they knew they were going to lose
Yeah.
some people, and they knew that they didn't want to carry them, so they had places left for them to put them.
Uh-huh.
We found a Chinese there. We dug up a Chinese. There's no doubt in my mind it was Chinese. The guy was over 6 feet tall. His face was that big around. I never saw a head so big in my life. You know, I can't explain it. That's just the way it was. He had a star on his belt buckle. They had wrapped him in gauze before they put him in the ground. All the rest of them were just thrown in the ground. But he had been taken. They gave him special care.
Huh.
Yeah,
So-
we dug up bodies.
So, but how many did you get in that? Do you remember how many you got?
I don't remember. There were quite a few.
Dozens or hundreds or?
I'd say dozens.
And thankfully, you guys didn't lose anybody.
We didn't lose anybody. We
Good.
had a couple guys wounded, but I don't think anybody was killed. And that was the 1st of January, and then around the 1st of January. And then they moved us the end of the month, around the middle of the month in January, up further north to a place that we established a fire base up there, and we named it Camp Evans. Now, I don't think anybody would have been there before us because we went in and dug holes, set up a perimeter. Now, somebody might have been there before us, but I don't know. The Marines, they weren't much of diggers. They
Yeah.
didn't dig too many fighting holes. They'd sleep on top of the ground. We dug holes. Everywhere we went, we dug holes.
Uh-huh.
We had a foxhole. We got up to Camp Evans. We set up there, and then we started running patrols out of Camp Evans. They were right in the foothills of the mountains, and there was a lot of these little low mountains, little hills through there, and a lot of plains, low shrubs growing, no big trees growing anywhere. So we were patrolling that area. What we do, we sleep in the daytime, and we go out and pull night ambushes. And I remember they had problems with the VC. In the middle of the night, they go out in the roads and dig these big holes, and it was just to stop the traffic.
Yeah.
So they couldn't get the trucks and stuff through there. They dig big holes in the road, so they have to stop, fill in the holes, and then they'd set mines all over the place. So if you stepped off the road, you'd be on a mine or something like that. They're just doing that. So we were patrolling, trying to catch them at night.
Uh-huh.
We go out and set up patrol, and then we hear somebody shoot a rifle off to the left here in a village, and they say, they know we're here. It was a warning. They would send warning shots to each other. So, you know, we did that for a couple of weeks. And then the Tet Offensive was coming up, and there was a lot of activity going on. And then, like on the 2nd of February, they called us up and said, hey, you guys, we got to go to Way. So our battalion commander sent us to Way, a whole battalion. They airlifted us out about 5 miles from the city. They dropped us off in a graveyard. And we spent the night there. We went light. We didn't take any packs or anything with us because it was supposed to be a forced march. We were supposed to get there right away. So we started that campaign. We spent the night there. We got up the next day and we started moving south. We got to these villages, and the villages were cleared out. It was near the holidays. They had candy and stuff laid out on tables, and you could tell there had been a lot of activity, but it was gone.
Nobody was there at all?
It was just gone. Everybody was gone.
Citizens were gone, the natives were gone? And
They went off and left the candy and sugar and all that stuff, and that's pretty popular stuff for them.
So you knew then something's going on?
Well, yeah, you knew it, but you didn't know what was going on. We were going away. We didn't know we knew that everybody had gotten hit. We went through some villages. I saw booby traps in those villages I never knew existed. I mean, they had all kinds of crazy stuff.
Give me an example.
Well, like if you take a skid, a regular wooden skid, and put punji sticks all over it and hang it in a tree over top of a trail.
Oh.
You know? Somebody to fall down and stab you.
Yeah.
They had bamboo tubes, so long, and they'd take a piece of an inner tube and put in it and put an arrow down in it and push it down in there, and they'd set a block there to hold it and make a trigger. So all you have to do is kick it, and this thing would shoot up out of there, and they had them set the angle where it go right up in your leg or in your side or something like that. That was wild stuff. And these people were good at that. I mean, I don't know. Went through places where I thought it was, you see it at a distance, it looked like a wheat field. It's punji sticks. Millions of them.
Jeez.
Millions of them. Little tiny trail through the middle of it.
So was the trail mined or anything?
No, it wasn't when we went through there. There wasn't no way else to get through there. Before you went out into this wheat field, I call it, there was a little patch of woods that you went through that had been defoliated.
By Agent Orange? Or
I would
bombs?
think so. Agent Orange. There were no bomb craters around. There was just no leaves. They had taken like a machete and cut in the sides of the tree, and they put these punji sticks in it, and then they pulled that back up and wrapped it, and they were grown into the tree. And it was like you'd see these old street signs with these punji sticks going all different directions through these trees. And then you get on the other side of them, and there's these millions of them across this whole field. It was pretty remarkable.
Wow.
We started to weigh, and we started finding these villages that were empty. We got to a certain point, and one of the guys had got a new pair of binoculars, and he was looking across this rice paddy. It wasn't it was dry paddies. It was dry rice paddies, and it was probably 300, 400 yards across. It was a good run. And he could see movement on the other side of the field. And we knew it was the enemy. You could see, I guess you could tell with the binoculars it was the enemy. So our battalion, who was kind of a gung-ho guy, he says, all right, we're going to get on the line and assault across there. So that's what we did. And the guys got about halfway across, and they opened up on us, and the buys are dropping like flies. And he kept pushing everybody out there. Well, there was 4 companies. First company just chopped all to pieces. The second company got up there, and they got chopped up pretty bad. And the third company, they had a helicopter flying over, and he was flying into the tree line, shooting into the tree line, and letting these guys move a little bit at a time. So we got in the tree line, and the enemy pulled back. And we got in there and set up a perimeter in the tree line. And within about an hour, we were completely surrounded. I mean, they were shooting at us from all directions. So we stayed there all night. They fought with us till it got dark. The next morning, they woke us up, shooting at us. And I don't know what kept them from overrunning us. I really don't know what kept them from doing it. Because we lost quite a few men then. Coming across that field was bad. This, during the Tet over there at that time, it's through their monsoon season too. You know how it's been for the last few days, these clouds just hanging over us? Well, that's the way it was over there, and it stayed like that all month. So we couldn't get helicopters in hardly, and we couldn't get any airplanes at all. So we were, you know, we didn't have any artillery. Our artillery had not caught up with us when we moved up to Camp Evans. So when we got there, we were just pretty much on our own.
Kind of sitting ducks.
Well, we were surrounded. Well, our battalion commander, after that whole day of fighting with them, not being able to move, we did get supplies in late that evening, and I got wounded that night, so I had to go back in. I was unloading a helicopter that came in, and as I was unloading it, you could hear rockets coming in, and they were trying to hit that helicopter. And he lifted off, and I could hear the rockets come in. They exploded. I could feel the heat off of it. It actually knocked me through the air to where I was carrying two water cans, and when the explosion exploded, when the rocket exploded, I went flying through the air. I dropped the water cans, and I landed in my foxhole on my head. And I stayed there.
Oh, yeah.
And then...
Well, now, were you wounded by that time?
Yes. I didn't know it.
How were you wounded?
I got my thumb just about cut off. And it was it was shrapnel from one of those rockets.
Okay.
One of the other guys got hit. He got hit in the butt with shrapnel. I didn't know I was even cut, and I was trying to bandage him up, and our executive officer came up and grabbed me around the wrist, and I was squirting blood, and threw a bandage on me, and we got his butt patched up. And late that evening, we had a helicopter come in, and we had some other guys seriously wounded. One of the platoon leaders came over to me, and this is before I got wounded. He sent a sergeant over, and I was a radio operator for the company commander, so I was in the CP. So he sent a guy to the CP, and he said they needed some help. They had some guys wounded out there, and they had to get them out of the open. So I carried a lot of smoke because I was calling in radio or helicopters all the time, and I carried a lot of smoke. The other radio operator carried a lot of smoke. There's two operators for the company commander, one for the company net, one for the battalion net. So we both carried a lot of smoke. I carried white phosphorus also. So we took all the smoke we had, and we went out there to where those guys had been shot, and the wind was just in our favor. We started throwing smoke out there at those guys in the foxholes. And as the smoke drifted over top of away from them and started drifting toward the enemy, we ran out there, grabbed them by the web gear, and run backwards back to the perimeter. We had a machine gun crew. All of them were shot. All of them were shot in the head. We had two other foxholes out there, and those guys were all wounded. All of them were wounded. None of them could shoot. And we drug them back. We just kept throwing smoke out. We were going to grab them by the web gear and drag them back. I can remember looking up and seeing tracers cutting through the air behind me as I was running, you know. I went in that night on the helicopter, got my thumb fixed. I went back out the next day. Well, that night, our battalion commander decided we're going to get out of this place. So they snuck out. They snuck out. They went back the way that we came in and circled around and went to the high ground down south of us, got on this big hill where we could see everything that was going on. And we stayed up there until Tet was over pretty much. We made, we left, I think it was 6 bodies. We had to leave when they left out of there that night. They didn't want to carry the bodies, and we couldn't get them out with the helicopter. So they put them in our mortar pit. They covered them with ponchos and everything, and then they buried them there.
Mm-hmm.
And when they snuck out and went around and got to the high ground, well, about 2 days later, we were going back to get the bodies. And we came down off that hill, and we got to this village, and there was this concrete bridge that went across the little creek here. It was a pretty good-sized creek. It was deep, maybe 20 feet wide, with real steep banks. And they had this little cement bridge that went across. And one of the guys tried to go across that bridge, and he got killed. They killed him on the bridge.
By a sniper?
Yeah. They had a machine gun set up on the other side of the bridge. And they had it camouflaged, you couldn't see it.
Uh-huh.
So one of the company commanders had a couple volunteers to go over and get them. And they went down underneath the bridge. They swam across the water and crawled up on the hill on the other side, and they knocked out that machine gun nest. And there was 5 guys in it. They killed all 5 of them. And then we crossed the bridge, and we started down out of the village, going back to where we left our bodies. And there was a cemetery between us and that last village. And my battalion commander wanted us to assault across it, which that's what we had to do. And we started across there, and the first platoon got about 2/3 of the way across, and the enemy opened up. They had machine guns. They had machine guns cross-firing. The cemetery had graves, and the graves were about this high above the ground.
About a foot above the ground?
Yes, and they were oval-shaped, maybe 5 feet, 6 feet, maybe at the most.
Okay.
Oval-shaped, maybe 4 feet wide. I got behind one of those. I got down behind one of those when they started shooting. Well, we were all running at first, and then when the firing started, everybody hit the ground. My company commander, he left me, and he went back behind me. He went across the road, and he went up front to where the first platoon they got in trouble. And the battalion commander got on the radio, and he wanted to talk to my company commander. I said, he's not here. He said, well, you better go find him. Well, you're not supposed to leave the company commander.
Uh-huh.
So I told Larry, that was the other radio operator, I said, we got to go, buddy. So we took off running. I went back to this mausoleum. There was a concrete wall bounded about that far, all the way around it. Had an opening on one end, had this big, tall building in the middle, stone.
Mm-hmm.
And I was running back there, and I remember diving into that place. And when I dove into it, I could see the bullets hitting the building right in front of me where they were shooting at me.
Uh-huh.
Well, I heard them go by my ears. I heard the bullets go right by my ears. I mean, there ain't another sound in the world like that. It was like pulling a pistol and shooting it right in your ear. But it went right by my ear. I remember it so clear. Got there in the mausoleum. I went across the road.
Well, where's the other radio man?
He's right behind me.
Okay.
He stayed
He
with
made
me.
it.
He
He
was
made
right
it
behind me.
too.
Yeah. He was behind me. I got there first. I waited. He came, and we went across the road into a creek on the other side, and we started up the road on the other side. And we were below the road, so the machine gun that was set up, it was set up right on the road. If you come down the road, you didn't have a chance. So the machine gun couldn't see us down there. So we got down there, and we went up to where the company commander was. By the time I got up there, it was getting dark. He had already, he was carrying a radio. The radio operator had gotten killed. the platoon leader had gotten killed. There was several guys up there dead. And he was having some of those guys brought back. The wounded was being brought back. And I told him the battalion commander's wanting me to get a hold of you. He wants to talk to you. He said, I don't have time to talk to him right now. I said, tell him I'm busy. And he was mad at me, the battalion commander. He was mad at me. Oh, I'm sorry. He told me, damn. He told me to go get him, and he wanted to talk to him right now. Well, he didn't want to talk to him.
Okay.
Well, I messed it up, didn't I?
Oh, that's all right. So what's happening to this machine gun that's set up in the roadway?
They quit shooting. After it got dark, they quit shooting at us. It got dark. We were retreating in the dark, and that seemed to be the habit that we had. It seemed like every time we get into a firefight, you was there till dark.
And then things calm down.
Well, they
After
quit
dark?
shooting, and you could get out of there. After that campaign, that was about a 30-day mission we had there, and I was glad it was over with. We were in what they call almost constant combat for a month. After we left Way, that was during the Tet Offensive, we never did get to Way. We got to where we could see Way. We got across the river from Way, but we never did get there. I didn't miss it either. Didn't miss it. I'm glad we didn't get there. I wish we had have. I mean, in one way, if we had missed that.
All the
We found out later that we ran into a reinforced battalion that was controlling the attack on Way, and the command group was right there and where we were. We ran into the command group. Now their mission was not to overrun us and wipe us out. Their mission was to control that battle. So that's the reason we got by with as much as we got by with. I mean, they could have overrun us anytime they wanted to, I think. So after the Way campaign, Operation Pegasus came up. Have you ever heard of that?
Just at the center where we go.
Well, Operation Pegasus came up, and they took our 1st Cav Division all the way up to Quezon, where the Marines were under siege up there. And I think it was pretty much over with when we got there, but we made what they call a show of force. The whole battalion went up there. I mean, it was hundreds of helicopters flying around up there, and the NBA must have thought something big was going on. So they cleared out. We never saw them. We saw a few of them, but a couple of the companies got into some pretty bad battles, but we never ran into no real heavy fighting there. Our worst problem was getting rid of the dead. There was so many dead NBA and VC laying around that they gave us bubonic plague shots before we went up there.
What'd you do with the enemy?
We
You bury him?
Buried them. We take a burial detail out and bury them.
Did they have any kind of an ID on them? The enemy? Of
They
any
had
kind?
they had IDs on them, but I never searched one of them. I didn't want to touch none of them. A lot of guys would go through their pockets and everything else. I didn't want to touch them. Looked green to me.
How could you tell the MVA from the NBA from?
The NBA wore uniforms.
Okay,
They wore Army uniforms. The VC wore black pajamas.
black pajamas.
They wore whatever they had. You know, whatever the peasants wore, that's what they wore.
Okay.
Mostly they were known for wearing the black pajamas. Sometimes they had white tops. Sometimes they had, they always wore black pants, you know, and they were like a silky material.
Did they all have helmets?
No. The NBA, no, they didn't all have helmets. A lot of them did. But the VC, they wore little conical hats. The NBA wore helmets, or they didn't wear any at all. The ones I saw that were dead, none of them had helmets on. they were probably confiscated when they were killed.
Okay. All right, so then what happens to you to get out of Korea, to get out of Vietnam?
Well, after Operation Pegasus, we were up there for several days. The Marines they got the road open and the Marines could leave. And, it was pretty much over with up there. A couple weeks after we left, they closed the place down. And I went back to Camp Evans, and then we set up a place called LZ Jane. We ran patrols out of LZ Jane until I went home. We stayed up there, and then that's
Any
what I did.
firefights up in LZ Jane?
We had a few, nothing big. Like I said, up there at LZ Jane, it was these rolling hills, and nothing over your knees hardly growing. Just a lot of VC activity at night. We did a lot of night patrols and night ambushes, but we didn't see a whole lot after that. And I was glad. I was ready to go home. When it was getting close to my time to go, and I was ready to go.
And where'd you leave from?
Well, I was at LZ Jane. I went back to On K. That's where I came into.
Uh-huh.
Then went back to Cameron Bay, where the Air Force was, and I flew out of there.
Where'd you fly back to?
Flew back to California. I mean, back to Washington, Tacoma, Washington.
And how were you greeted at the airport?
How did I leave the airport?
How were you greeted at the airport?
Oh, at the airport? It was a military flight. We went into an area, they loaded us on a bus. They took us to a barracks. They took us upstairs before we went upstairs, they measured us for new uniforms. We went upstairs for an in-country orientation I don't know what it was for, in-country orientation. And while we sat there and waited, we saw the van come up downstairs. They had our uniforms in it. He said, well, this meeting's over. You guys go down and get your uniforms. And they gave us these little tokens where you can get a steak meal for free at a mess hall there. Well, I took my token and gave it to somebody else. I told them, I don't want no steak. I want to get on the bus and leave. So I got on the bus and I waited till everybody else ate their steaks. Then they filled the bus up and we left. I sat out there by myself in the bus. Everybody else was in there eating. I thought the bus would leave. I didn't know he was going to wait for everybody, but he did. So they took us to the airport. We were all in Class A uniforms then. I don't remember any problems at all when I got to the airport as far as people shunning or saying anything.
Uh-huh.
They had, at that time, the airports was set up, and I don't think it's like that today, but they had lounges set up at the airports. And the only ones you ever saw in these lounges were GIs in transit.
Okay.
And they would go to these lounges and crash, you know.
Yeah.
And went to the airport. I couldn't leave until, I can't remember, let's see, I got there at noon. We left around 5 o'clock in the evening maybe. And I flew to Chicago. I called my wife in Chicago and told her that I'd be in Dayton in an hour. And as I hung up the phone, the lady at the desk said, sir, if you want to pay $8 more, you can take this first class flight and leave right now. So I gave her the money and got on a first class flight. What got me was I remember when I flew from Washington to Chicago, they served us breakfast just before we went down. And then when we left Dayton, they served us breakfast again before we got to Dayton.
You mean Chicago? You left Chicago, they gave you another breakfast?
They gave us another breakfast on the way to Dayton. And I was so fascinated. Here I'm the only guy on there in uniform. All the rest of them are business suits. These men are sitting around reading the paper, having their breakfast, their coffee.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, these guys commute by airplane every day. You could tell by the way they act.
Yeah.
This is their usual routine. I'm thinking, gee whiz, what kind of world am I in? You know, it was different, it was strange for me.
Yeah.
And I got into Dayton, and I don't know how, but my wife was already there. I went in to get a haircut because I didn't see him when I first landed. And while I was getting a haircut, I heard the announcement that they were looking for me on the intercom. So I went out I got out of the barber shop and went out, and the first thing I saw was my son. My son was sitting in a grocery cart, you know, one of them little push around golf cart. He was sitting in there, and I recognized him, and my wife's cousin was there. My wife wasn't there. She'd gone to the bathroom. So I saw my son for first thing, and I went out and grabbed him, and then my wife came in, and we left there and went home, and my mom and dad was having a little reunion, and they didn't know us coming.
So that was their best reunion.
That was a homecoming for them. I laid down in the back seat of the car when we pulled up. My wife drove around like, you know, she was just coming to the reunion. It was a birthday party or something.
Yeah.
And I got up, and my mom just started crying. My mom is what got me through Vietnam, because I know
She write to you or what?
She prayed for me every day.
How about communication? Were you able to write letters or get letters?
I could, but what I was doing, I really didn't want to write home about.
Well, they didn't know whether you were living or dead.
Well, when you got nothing good to write about, it's hard to just write home. You know, it's just, how are you doing? I'm doing good. I wrote some letters, but not many. There wasn't nothing that I really, you couldn't tell them where you were at or what you were doing. You had restrictions on what you could say.
But just tell them you're still among the living.
I had an in-country R&R. I went to Da Nang. I went to China Beach, and I stayed there for 3 days. And while I was there, I got on Mars and called home.
Okay.
Talked to my wife then.
All right.
Yeah, I think I got her up at like 3 o'clock in the morning.
She didn't care.
No, she didn't care.
So when you got back to the States, did you have to finish out any more military duty?
Yes, I had to spend 5 months out in Colorado, at Colorado Springs, which was a beautiful place. I liked it.
Right.
But I was tired of the military. I was ready to go home. Had enough.
So when you finally came back here to stay, you went back to GE?
Yes.
Any problem getting your old job back? Or?
No, I went down to apply for my job, and it was on the 1st of December, I believe. And the office was closed. The personnel office was closed. They told me to come back Thursday. So I went back in Thursday, and they processed me back into work. And then I worked Friday, Thursday and Friday, and I went back in on Monday to work, and I worked that week. And on Thursday, I got a paycheck, which was a small paycheck. And then I worked the next week, and I was on a machine, and the committee would come by one day, and he says, "Aren't you new here?" And I said, "Well, I just got out of the service." He said, "When did you come back to work?" I said, "Well, I came back to work on the 1st, but I said they wouldn't let me back to work until the Thursday." So he says, "I think you got some vacation time coming." And my next check had 3 weeks vacation on it.
That was a nice treat.
Yeah, something unexpected.
So how about what did Lois do while you were in the military?
Lois
Just to
wasn't
take
my
care
wife
of the,
then.
Oh, okay.
No, my first wife was, well, she wasn't doing anything, taking care of the kids.
Okay.
That's it.
What was your first wife's name?
Norma.
Norma?
Yeah. We had a pretty bad breakup. She's not a very good friend of mine.
You had 2 children, Thomas Lee Jr. and a
Elizabeth.
daughter, Anna Elizabeth. Her last name now is Kerber. How old's Thomas Jr.?
He's 50.
And how about Anna?
She's probably 46 or 47.
Now, was Thomas in the military?
Yes, he was in the Marine Corps for 4 years.
Okay, where did he serve?
He served in, he was in Okinawa, with a little bit in Japan. He did go to Kuwait,
Okay.
but he was rotating out at the time. He was getting out.
Uh-huh.
So they asked him if he wanted to extend and stay over there, or did he want to go home? And he came home, and I told him it's the best thing he ever did.
So I think
When he went to, when they told me he was going over there, put me in bed. I was in anguish.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't breathe.
Really? Just so worried about him, huh?
Just didn't want him to go through any of the shit that I had to go through, you
Yeah.
know?
So he's disabled, you told me before.
Well, he's not totally disabled. He's had some problems with his feet. He had to have his feet operated on,
Uh-huh.
and he's so big that he can't really stay on his feet very long. So he's disabled in a sense. He's
Yeah.
not totally disabled, but
But he can't work.
he can't work right now.
Yeah.
He can. He could if he got a job where he could sit down maybe.
Yeah.
He welded for a while like I did, but that job didn't pan out very well. They closed the place up, laid him off.
What's Anna doing?
My daughter,
Daughter.
she's got a shop up in Troy. It's called the Weird Sisters, and she sells anything she can get her hands on. She's doing real well.
Good.
She's doing well.
You got grandchildren?
I've got grandchildren. I've got great-grandchildren.
Great-grandchildren.
Yes. My granddaughter has 2 boys, Caden and Tristan. And my daughter has, that's my son's daughter,
Okay.
is Christy, and she's got my great-grandsons. And then my daughter has 4 girls. That's Jordan, Skylar, Avery, and Kendall.
All right.
And they're from 14 down to 5 or 6.
Now, where do they live?
Oh, Troy.
Up in Troy? Where'd your son and daughter go to school?
They went to Franklin.
Franklin? Let's see. You retired from GE when?
In 2002.
Well, what did you get? Decorations or medals or commendations? What?
Yeah, I got
Oh, you got a hatful.
I got a Bronze Star. I have an Air Medal. I have a Purple Heart, and then these are just Vietnam campaign ribbons.
And what's the one on top?
That's the best. That's the Combat Infantryman's badge.
All right. Turn that around and hold it up. I don't know. Our cameraman today is Dave Killen, and I don't know if he can get that on there.
What's that?
Your medals. I don't know if that'll show up or not, Dave. All right.
Good job.
And the one in front, Air Cavalry Vietnam.
Yeah.
The top one.
Yeah, that's first cab patch. This is the Cross Sabers. That's because it was a cavalry unit.
All right. And the other.
I was a sergeant.
Okay. So, when you were discharged, you were a sergeant. What'd you go in as?
Went in as a private,
Private,
Yeah.
PFC,
E1,
E1.
but
Okay.
private. That's where you start at in the Army, especially if you get drafted.
Well, is there anything else you want to mention about your military career or about your family?
Nah, I've gone over enough of it already.
How'd you?
There was a lot of little episodes over there that you can't chronicleize. You know, you can't keep them in order. You can't organize them. You can't keep the thoughts straight on them sometimes. But
What's the closest you came to getting killed when you were diving into that?
That time, and once we were surrounded there at we called it. I'm not going to tell you what we called it.
Okay.
We called TT Woods.
Okay.
In the book, it's called the fucking place.
Oh, okay.
When we were there, I remember digging a hole, and I got behind a row of bamboo trees, and I dug down behind them. And while I was digging a hole, I could see the splinters coming through those trees, sticking in my face.
Oh, really?
Yes. Where the bullets were coming through, they was knocking splinters off, and the splinters was sticking in my face while I was digging my hole.
Boy.
And you had to use the bathroom in your hole. You used the C ration box,
Yeah.
cans, whatever you could.
Yeah.
You couldn't get up and move around.
Right.
They had us pinned down.
Dave, do you have any question you'd like to ask?
No, thank you though for your beautiful stories.
All right.
Quite a well.
Thank you.
Thank you.